Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. In the program of 1 hour, we have divided it into 4 segments. The first 3 segments are for 10 minutes each, and the next fourth segment is for questions and answers, which is for 30 minutes. The first segment is explanation of a certain Quranic passage. I have been talking about certain passages from the Quran and have been following a certain sequence. We have reached Surah At-Tawbah, which is Surah number 9. It is also called Surah Bara. In this particular Surah, the Almighty has described His punishment that He inflicted upon the people who received the message of God directly from His messenger in the Arabian Peninsula. And after the message was delivered most clearly and convincingly, they were ultimately subjected to divine punishment, which was something that they were warned against right from the beginning. Surah At-Tawbah describes those punishments and describes the group of people who were subjected to those punishments. So we already seen that the surah talks about the polytheists who received the punishment, divine punishment. Then it mentions the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. And then the surah goes on to describe the punishment that the Almighty inflicted upon the hypocrites, people who were rejectors of the truth, but they were apparently Muslims. They claimed to belong to the Muslim community. They were a difficult lot, and therefore they were meted out with a treatment which was different and which needed more time and more space. So the Quran has talked about the fate of the hypocrites and the way they were dealt with in a relatively much longer part of Surah At-Tawbah. The passage that I've chosen for the purpose of describing their treatment and the Almighty's comments on what these hypocrites were like are verses 67 and 68 from Surah At-Tawbah. The Almighty says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Al-Munafiquna wal-Munafiqat, ba'duhum min ba'd. The hypocrite men and hypocrite women are one and the same. They are the same community, they are the same group, and they are very similar to each other. The Almighty has significantly mentioned women as well, because quite often when the Almighty talks about a certain group of people in the masculine gender, it also includes women as well. However, separate mention of women as well really means that the Almighty wants to make it pronounced. It should be made absolutely clear that when the Almighty's punishment gets inflicted upon a certain community, it really is all across the board. Men, women, everybody who is guilty of not responding to the Almighty's message properly are going to ultimately face His wrath, His punishment, which obviously really means something that we already know, but we need to emphasize over and over again, that the message of God is meant for all humans, men and women. And therefore, all humans have a right to understand what that message is, and they should be given the right of freedom to pick and choose what they think is the correct understanding, the correct religion, and the correct religious understanding. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمُنْكَرِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ. These hypocrite men and women are the ones who enjoin what is wrong and forbid what is right. That is, instead of what the believers do, which the Quran mentions in the same surah elsewhere, that good believers, they enjoin what is good and they forbid what is evil. They're, these hypocrites, they do just the opposite. It's absolutely clear from the Quran that when the Quran talks about people who are kafir, rejectors of truth, they are the ones who are worse than beasts. They've got very low morals. They don't they don't appreciate what is right, and they don't stay away from what is wrong. It's because of their evil ways that they're unable to appreciate, understand, and acknowledge the truth coming from God. So it's not that it's just an accidental disagreement that some people have with the divine message because they don't agree with it, that they are declared guilty and considered worthy of punishment. There are These are the people who were ultimately punished, who had actually demonstrated through their behavior that they are morally very low. They are not good humans. So they would enjoin what is evil, encourage people to do what is bad, what is filthy, and they would stop people from doing what is good. So, that's the kind of behavior that they started showing. وَيَقْبِضُونَ أَيْدِيَهُمْ, and they close their hands. They tighten their hands. That is, instead of having their hands open, which is proverbially, they spend in the way of God, they spend for the welfare of the poor people, the downtrodden who are deprived. They don't find it something that they are interested in. So they're so deeply obsessed with the worldly uh, love of the worldly possessions, their wealth, etc., that they find it very difficult to spend it on others. Nasullah, they have forgotten God. Fanasiyahum, so He has also forgotten them. That is, they don't remember God. They don't look forward to asking Him for help. They don't see the possibility of meeting Him. So they don't remember Him. Even if they pray simply because they're forced to pray. The hypocrites used to pray because they had to show to Muslims that they are Muslims too, even though they were not. So they used to show off, but they don't remember God. So what it means is that even if you pray, it's not necessary that you're remembering God unless you're trying your best to remember Him from your heart. So the Quran says, Nasullah, they've forgotten God, fanasiyahum, and He has forgotten them as well. In other words, God is not interested in their welfare, betterment, success anymore. He created them. He wanted them to be interested in His message, but they didn't show any interest. They were not inclined to remember Him. So God has also decided that He is not going to remember them in kind words anymore. Inna al-munafiqina humul fasiqun. These hypocrites, they are indeed disobedient. They have gone beyond limits. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ. God has promised these hypocrite men and hypocrite women, wal kuffar, and all other kuffar, rejectors of the truth. Nara Jahannam is promised for them the fire of hell. Khalidina fiha, they shall reside therein forever. Hiya hasbuhum, that is going to be sufficient for them. That is the kind of evil ways that they have adopted. There's nothing else that they deserve. And when they'll be consigned to the hellfire, that will be a sufficient punishment for them. وَلَعَنَهُمُ, and God will curse them. God's curse will fall upon them. Lanat means deprivation. You're deprived from God's mercy. So they'll be deprived from the Almighty's mercy, which otherwise would be all across. It's profound, it's meant for everyone, except for the ones who have behaved in a manner that they have proved for themselves that they don't deserve it anymore. Malahum azabum muqim, and for them there is going to be a punishment that will stay. It's not going to be temporary. It's going to stay with them. That's what the punishment of these people are. So that finishes my first part of the presentation. The second segment is prayer. Remember, we talk about certain topics which are relevant to the understanding of Islam. And I've been talking about a number of subjects in a certain sequence. And we started our discussion on beliefs. We've covered belief in God, the various aspects of it. Now, from today, I will start talking on belief in prophets. The two expressions used in the Quran for the people whom the Almighty chose, selected, for them to deliver His message to mankind. The two expressions are Nabi and Rasul. Any human, and all those who were picked were men, any man picked by the Almighty for the purpose for him to deliver God's message to the rest of the mankind, to the people whom he addressed, he confronted. Such people, such men who receive his wahi, they're called Nabi, the plural of which is Anbiya. From amongst these Anbiya, there are a few who are Rasul as well. So a Rasul has to be a Nabi as well. But all Anbiya are not necessarily Rasul. In fact, if we accept the authenticity of the hadith that talks about it, it says that there was something like 124,000 Anbiya, and from amongst them 313 were Rasul. Now, a Nabi is a person who receives the Almighty's wahi and his divine revelation, and his duty is to let people know what the Almighty expects from them. Basically, he tells them that this life is temporary, and there's going to be another life in God's scheme, which is going to be the ultimate place to live. He tells them about the Almighty's expectations, which basically humans already know, but people forget, people are confused. So a Nabi clarifies, and so on. But a Rasul, who is also a Nabi, he is somebody who comes with a very clear mandate. He comes with a clear understanding that he delivers to his nation that I am from God, and I've come with this very clear promise from the Almighty that my message, and my followers, my companions, are going to prevail. That is, we will ultimately succeed. We will ultimately be the winners in this world and in the next world. And those who will oppose us shall be subjugated, shall be punished in this life, subjugated in some cases, punished in every case, and they are going to be punished in the next life as well. So their punishment in this life is going to be the beginning of the punishment that is going to continue for until the day of judgment and beyond. So a Rasul, therefore, comes with an additional possibility that is attached with his mission, which is the possibility of that mission to succeed, to prevail. That's what the difference between the two is. So as I said, all Anbiya cannot be Rasul, but all Rasul have to be first Anbiya, and then they are also another step ahead. They have another feather in their cap, which is for them to be Rasul. Uh, God wants his Rasul, his Anbiya, to be believed in, to be acknowledged. Why? Because they are the ones who come with a clear understanding of what God wants from us. They are the ones who are actually the source of authentic, direct information about God. We know about God by birth in our intuitive understanding. We know about God from our surroundings, from the kind of teachings, moral understandings that we witness in our societies. However, they are not clear in many cases. There are differences. You know, in many cases, you can be unsure as to whether a certain thing is from God or some other expectation has come from Him. However, once you get a message from a Nabi, a prophet, or a Rasul, who is also a Rasul, a messenger, then you are doubly sure. You are confident that what you have got is from God. And therefore, the more clear you are, or let's say, the more clearly you are informed about God's message, the more you would feel confident, the more you are privileged. But then obviously there is a flip side of it as well. That the more you are well informed, the more you're likely to be accountable if you don't behave properly, if your attitude is not correct. Now, because God wants that His prophets should be acknowledged, should be accepted, He has therefore ensured that the arguments, the supporting evidences that make it clear that the man who is claiming to be from God is indeed from God, he has presented those arguments in a manner that for those people at least who are the immediate addressees of the prophets, it becomes absolutely clear, well, sooner or later, that this man is actually from God, and therefore he has to be accepted. There is no doubt about it. So God, what I'm saying is, arranges for evidences for the people who receive the message of these prophets and messengers directly, for them to be to be placed in a situation where they have no choice, where the truth becomes absolutely manifest clear. That is why those who do not accept them beyond a certain duration, beyond a certain limit, they are described as kafir. Those who reject the message of God knowingly, which obviously is a huge, big crime, and its punishment is mentioned in the Quran. Now, for us Muslims, what is the most important thing to understand and to appreciate is, and obviously this is not just true for Muslims, it is true for all humans, that Prophet Muhammad, may God's mercy be on him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came with a message from God. So he was a Nabi as well as a Rasul. And he was the last of the messengers, last of the prophets. Therefore, the Almighty ensured that his message should remain fully preserved. Why? Because even if in the case of the earlier prophets, their messages got distorted, uh, they, their messages would get corrected by the later prophets. So the later prophets would make sure that if there are any additions that have entered the message, or there are some parts of the message that have been omitted by later people, the new prophets would correct them. However, if the Almighty has decided that there is going to be no further prophets coming to this world anymore after the last prophet, may God's mercy be on him, then it was important that the message brought by the last prophet be fully preserved. What I would like to say now briefly is that in order for the Almighty to make sure that the reality of the fact that Muhammad, God's mercy be on him, was God's messenger, he gave evidences, arguments to support this claim. And I will talk about these arguments one by one in my later presentations with you, inshallah. But I'll just briefly mention the 4 different categories of arguments that the Quran presents to support the claim that Muhammadur Rasulullah, Muhammad, God's mercy be on him, is the messenger of Allah. The belief in the last prophet is actually belief in all other prophets, because he was the last one. If you believe in him, you will believe in all previous ones, some of whose names are mentioned in the Quran, others are not mentioned, but you believe in everybody. The Quran mentions 4 different categories of arguments to prove that Muhammad, God's mercy be on him, was God's messenger. What are the categories? Number 1, his character. Number 2, the message he brought. Number 3, the prophecies about him that were there in the earlier books. And number 4, the prophecy that the prophet made, the messenger gave, that was to be realized during his lifetime or during the same era. And that promise was mentioned over and over again, so very clearly that there was no denying the fact that this promise is going to be realized. And that promise, that prophecy was realized indeed. So we will see one by one in the later sessions, inshallah, what these 4 categories of arguments are. Now, I move on to my third topic for today. This topic is what I normally choose to describe one area of understanding of Islam that is more relevant to people living in the non-Muslim world, where Muslims are in a minority. The topic that I've chosen for today is the implementation of Sharia in non-Muslim countries in matters of nikah and talaq. I'm sure that people living in Britain and elsewhere do confront this question every now and then, that there are people, men and women, who would want to get married, and at times, unfortunately, there are possibilities of divorce as well, and the local laws expectations are there for everybody living in the country to follow, but the laws and the traditions of Islam seem to be somewhat different. So what exactly should be done about it? Let's first take nikah. If a nikah is to be registered in whatever formal way in your country, let's say in county council offices, uh, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't run contrary to the expectations of how a nikah needs to be solemnized and formally done uh, from the point of view of Sharia. We all know that even in Pakistan now, we have a system where my nikah is actually formally registered, and there are forms which are filled in. So what should a couple do if they are getting married? Would it be okay for them to get married the way the local laws and customs require them to follow to be married? Well, the fact of the matter is that the formal process of nikah, as prescribed in the Sharia, in the Sunnah of the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, that too needs to be followed. So, what does it entail? Well, there are basically a few requirements. One binding requirement is that all grooms and bridegrooms, brides and grooms, they, at the time of getting married, should take a decision which is their very own decision. They should, in other words, freely agree to this important arrangement that's been being made. Uh, and for that, there is a way that has been suggested in our tradition. But the important thing is to have consent from both sides, no matter what way is followed. The other important requirement of nikah is that it should be announced. What makes a nikah different from the illegitimate relationship between man and woman is that the other way is done secretly, in hiding. But this is what is declared in public. So a new family is now in the process of getting created, and this announcement has to be made in front of people. Obviously, it would make no sense if those people are completely irrelevant as far as this couple is concerned. They've got to be the ones who are the closest to both, to the groom, to the bride as well as to the groom. So there should be parents, siblings, close relatives, friends, etc. And the announcement should be made before them. There is a mention of meher, dower, which is an amount which the groom uh, gives gifts to his wife and makes the announcement that this is what is happening. The idea is that because in a family suggested by the Almighty, the way it should function, the husband has to take the responsibility of the economic needs of the family. Therefore, he announces an amount of meher, which is what has to be paid by the groom, by the husband, and it should be a decent amount, an amount which should give, on the one hand, a clear message that the groom is interested in getting married, and that he has now announced his very clear intention that from now on, that's what the pattern is going to be. He will earn, and she's going to be the one who will receive the amount for her needs, etc. Uh, because it's an occasion when an important decision is being announced, uh, there is a khutbah. There is a presentation of a few verses relevant to the occasion, and they need to be explained. They need to be clarified to the people who are gathered there, because the khutbah is actually meant to inform and to remind people, more particularly the bride and the groom, of their responsibilities, of the importance of the kind of life that they're going to now experience, and the kind of behavior that the Almighty expects them to display. And it emphasizes more than anything else taqwa, God consciousness, while dealing with others. So that's khutbah. It's followed by dua. Now this ceremony, this occasion, formal occasion, can be done, and then obviously whatever process of registration of this nikah, marriage, is expected by the local law, the local customs, should also be gone through. There's nothing conflicting between the two. When it comes to divorce, again, obviously there are divorce laws, local laws. The Islamic law on divorce requires that the husband, if he is for some reason not willing to continue with this bond of marriage, he will give divorce, pronounce it. Pronouncement is not necessarily verbal. It can be in writing as well. It can be done in any way which is clear enough, unambiguous, in giving a clear statement that the husband is now showing his intention of not living with his wife anymore. It should be done in a way that the wife is in her clean period, and in that clean period, the husband hasn't had physical contact with her. And when he will pronounce this talaq, then there are going to be 3 menstrual periods, 1, 2, and 3. At the end of the third, the iddat, the counting period for the talaq to reach its finishing date is completed. So it's around 3 months roughly. That's what needs to be done. If a person gives talaq to his wife and does a ruju, reconciles within the period of this iddat, then the husband who has 2 chances of giving talaq to his wife utilizes one of them, and then when it happens again, gives talaq, and then does ruju within that stipulated period of iddat, then he will exhaust the second opportunity, second possibility as well. Then he's going to be left with no other possibility to give talaq to his wife and then to take her back within iddat. If she departs after the first talaq or the second talaq, after the end of the iddat period, she is free to marry anyone, a new husband or the same old husband, but it has to be a new nikah. But this nikah with the first husband is not possible after 2 talaqs have been given, one and taken back, and the second, and then reconciliation again. The third time it cannot happen. Now, when it comes to your local customs and laws, if a talaq is given, well, a wife would not give talaq, she would actually ask for talaq. And the husband should oblige. If the local laws allow a wife to give talaq, and if she is aware of what the Almighty is expecting, well, she should tell her husband that I want talaq from you. You better give it to me. If he doesn't, and he's reluctant, and she avails the opportunity of doing it from her side after having given him clear warnings, some time for him to consider, well, then obviously she is well within her right to ask the law to get the proceedings of talaq done. But obviously, when it comes to administering, implementing talaq, the local laws and customs should be utilized along with the understanding of what the Quran is telling us, so that there should be no conflict between the two. The Quran keeps telling us that these laws given by God are meant to be respected, honored, and followed. So let's not violate them on the one hand, and let's not ignore what the local expectations are. As far as I know, there are no conflicts between the two. Uh, and if there are any, they can be easily reconciled by the right behavior from part of the parties who are involved in going through the process. So that completes my part of the three segments, and now I am available for the question answer session.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So we have got some opening questions, and Sister Rafia has raised her hand as well. I'll start with some questions that were posted by Brother Mushtaq. The first question that he asked was, what advice would you give to a young college graduate about pursuing an education in becoming a religious scholar?
Um, if there are university graduates who are, assuming living in the West, uh, they are going through education, which is what we call secular education. Um, you know, if you get into a university undergraduate program, uh, quite often it's for 3 years or 4 years. Uh, I know that even in the West, uh, you have the opportunities of picking quite a few courses on Islam, religious studies, etc. Uh, that's one possibility. There are universities around the world where you can have more specialized religious education. And obviously, when I say religious education, it also includes courses which are uh, more intense, more detailed in teaching you about Islam. There are good courses around the world available, good teachers offering those courses. Uh, there are, I know, madrasas and seminaries in Britain, for instance, and there are quite a few people who go to those madrasas and they go through the formal religious education. Uh, although that might be one option, and if somebody avails that option, I would suggest to him or her that there are some definite virtues of the madrasa system of education. You know, there is rigor in the manner they are asked to study. Uh, they get discipline. Uh, they get a very important uh, aspect of training, which is uh, which is respect for the elders, respect for customs, for traditions. Uh, so the environment, generally speaking, is conducive to bringing an individual closer to God and closer to the Islamic norms. But there are problems in madrasa education as well. Problem of following only one point of view. The tendency is that you're not exposed to other views. Critical thinking is not something that is greatly encouraged. Not sure about every madrasa, but that's general trend. You get admission into one madrasa, and it's given already that, for instance, you're going to be a Shafi or a Hanafi or etc. And it's less likely that you will get the exposure and understanding of other disciplines, other religions, etc. However, however, somebody studies in a madrasa, he or she, on the one hand, taking advantage of the virtues of madrasa education, can also avail the possibility of the other views and the other disciplines and can take courses from elsewhere, you know, learn from teachers who offer more courses and ways of understanding Islam and other religions, etc. Uh, if you are an undergraduate from a non-madrasa system of education, you can also the potential available in the madrasa if you have a good relationship with these people, where there could be some outstanding teachers who can actually help you in learning more and more. What I'm trying to say is, in response to Mushtaq Saab's question, is that there is no one clear answer to the question. There are a number of possibilities that are available today to all those young people, men and women, who want to understand Islam more deeply. And there are different levels that are available. You know, we're already in the process of developing a system of learning in Al-Mawrid. Our Department of Education, headed by Sajid Hamid Saab, is working very hard to come out with a number of courses at different levels, right from the beginning till as far as one can go in learning Islam and doing research on Islam. Some of those courses have already been developed. Very few of them have been introduced, but we're very hopeful that once the entire plan is formally approved and prepared, we will also be one of the options that young people can always look for to learn and understand Islam more properly and deeply.
All right. So we've got a second question from Mushtaq Saab. I may not be able to completely explain this, but it's something along the lines that this possibly this young student has had some experiences with jinns, and I know or I have heard that you have had, uh, you know, you have had some personal encounters with jinns as well. I hope you don't call people jinn or anything, but I'll let him explain what he means by it, or and what he wants to ask in this regard. So, Mushtaq Saab, I've unmuted you.
Assalamu alaikum, Zaheer Saab. I have heard a long time ago that you had an encounter with a jinn. And I wanted to find out, were there any follow-up encounters or not? And some general information exactly as to what the general public need to know about it.
Mushtaq Sahab, I'm unfairly notorious, for having gone through that experience. But you're right. I mean, I can't blame you for having that understanding, because I did indeed go through an experience which I actually wrote down. I wrote an article on it, which is still there in my website. So if I'm known to be in contact with jinns, well, that knowledge is because I myself have made a claim. Honest to God, I am in no contact with jinns except for the jinn that's always with me in the form of my Satan trying to entice me towards the wrong path. And I tell you, he's very active. And unfortunately, in many cases, is successful too. May Allah protect me from the evil tendencies and efforts of this Satan jinn. But, long time ago, I wrongly, incorrectly subjected somebody very close to me, a dear young fellow, um, to a jinn. What it means is that I was informed that, kids around the age of 13, 14 are the ones who are, or are the ones who can be actually a good uh, medium of getting in touch with jinns. So I admit I committed a blunder that I allowed somebody very close to me to be that medium. And what happened was that, and obviously many of you would be wondering that, I mean, how is it possible that you committed that blunder? Well, I thought about it. I consulted one or two people, and I said to myself that if, if Sulaiman alayhi salam can also have jinns who were positive, good, pious, why should I not try about it? So it was a period of something like 6 months that we went through, wherein it was always almost on a daily basis, mornings, afternoons, evenings, when we would contact a jinn through that young man. He would be the one who would see jinn with his eyes closed, in his mind, and we would talk to him through this young man. And it's a long story. I mean, a number of things that we would speak to him about, and we get answers to them. And most of the answers were the kind of answers that this young man at the age of 13, 14 couldn't have come up with. Uh, the nutshell was that I actually mentioned it in that article, that these jinns are actually instrumental in requiring some people who are inclined to be in contact with them, like I wrongly did, and they cause uh, these people humans who contact with these jinns, to be led astray, to be shown things as if they are real in their mind, in their imagination, in their dreams, and you never know in the real world. Uh, the kind of experiences, the kind of images that would then lead them to the wrong way, wrong path. Uh, I have given it up. I gave it up 6 months after I started this. I started doing things. I committed that blunder. Now, what I do, Mushtaq Saab, is that because I am in the business of telling people about religion, and believe me, in my part of the world, a large number of people who come up with problems which are jinn related. So what I do now is what is called outsourcing. So I'm in contact with a few people about whom I feel confident that they are decent humans. They are not the kind of people who would deceive others for the sake of, let's say, taking money, and tell them things which are unreal, and would cause them to be in trouble. So that's what I do now. I know that the people who are in contact with jinns, I know that jinns can be very harmful, uh, but I'm not directly now in that business, in that experience anymore. Probably I never was. But there are a number of people who are actually in direct contact with jinns, and they get their tasks done through them. Uh, these people could be good, these people could be evil. I outsource and use their services only when I feel comfortable that the people that I am referring others to are reliable people.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saab. We've got a question from Sister Rehana Chaudhary. You were talking about meher in your presentation, and she was asking at that time, is it a one-time amount or a monthly amount? So,
Uh, Meher is a one-time amount, but it's a token, it's a symbol. It's a symbol which is, let's say, a statement, practical statement from the groom to the bride, to his wife, that look here, we're starting a new journey. I am taking the responsibility. Here is my gift to you. It's yours. And that's what the pattern is going to be. So, if the wife feels that at the time of her marriage, she would like her husband to commit that he's going to make a certain payment to her every month, that is a possibility. She can ask him to do it. Quite often in our part of the world, it's not done, but there is nothing wrong with it. But obviously, circumstances, economic conditions can change. But the basic idea is the same, that primarily it's the responsibility of the husband to take care of the economic needs of the family, or he is also expected uh, to financially support his wife and give her an amount which is her due right on a regular basis. And meher is the first of those payments.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saab. So just to remind everybody, if you want to ask a question, uh, if you are joining from mobile, on the top right, you will see a hand icon. You can click that and raise your hand. Or if you are using it from your laptop, then on the control panel, you'll see an option there. Raise your hand, then I'll unmute you and you can ask your question. So I've got the next question from Sister Rafia. Let me unmute her and then she can ask a question. So Sister Rafia, I have unmuted you. You can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Khalid, can you hear me?
Walaikum salam, I can.
Dr. Khalid, some days ago, I'm in the States and I asked you about the use of gelatin and sweets and other things which my grandchildren are eating. And I was just waiting for a reply from you. And meanwhile, I tried to investigate about gelatin, and it is made of the skin of cattle and hoofs, and when it is boiled, chemicals are added to it, so the original thing doesn't remain what it is. So in that respect, I wanted to ask you that whether it is okay, because gelatin is used for medicine purposes, it is used for sweets, it is used for many things. So if you could kindly guide me about this.
Uh, you see, the basic expectation of the Almighty is that we're not going to consume anything which is haram. When it comes to edibles, all beasts are haram. Those animals which are basically vegetarians, they're not beasts, not consume flesh of other animals, they are declared halal. And there is a way prescribed to slaughter them so that their blood gets properly drained and the Almighty's name is pronounced on them. That's about what you consume as food. Now, that is obviously very clear. But then you have certain other items, edibles, eatables that we consume, where the ingredients, the component of such items which are not allowed to us is very small. Um, like, gelatin, etc., that you mentioned. The basic principle is what is not allowed in a large volume is also not allowed in a, or shall I say, we should avoid it in small volume as well. Uh, I can't say for sure that it's absolutely haram if it's just, 0.05% of the total weight of what you're eating. Because obviously, what is wrong, but then obviously volume also matters. So I did mention in my reply to your question that try to convince them that they do not consume that particular dish, which has a gelatin and other items as its ingredients, even if in small volume. Uh, the idea that they are required to go through a process where their chemical form changes and therefore they can be consumed is what as yet has not convinced me. Because it's not the chemical composition of a certain edible that matters. I can be wrong, but I think basic spirit is that we are to avoid all flesh of all animals that are beasts. Now, if before consuming a certain flesh, certain meat of an animal, of a beast, we require it to go through a certain process which completely changes its chemical composition. I don't know, as yet I'm not convinced. I think the problem stays. I mean, you are not allowed to consume the flesh of a beast. And no matter how many changes it goes through, how transformed it is from what it originally was, it still is the same. So what I'm saying is that when these kids are consuming a certain dish which they like and they are thoroughly obsessed with the idea that they would consume it, it's one of their favorite dishes. You can't stop them immediately. What you need to tell them is that there is a problem in the ingredients. Uh, Let them take their time. Let them understand. Let them do their own investigation. Just put it in their ears so that they have this possibility in their mind. Uh, Even if there are elders who are consuming such things, we just mentioned that we will avoid what is wrong, even if it's in small volume, as best as we can. But let's not make it a big issue uh, for everybody to be worried about it all the time. Those people who are more careful will avoid everything. Others will probably be a little uh, lax in case of items which have a small volume of these items and so on. So that's going to be naturally uh, different attitudes coming from different categories.
Yeah, Dr. Saab, I've read something similar where there is this American Salafi scholar Yasir Qadi. He had written an article, and gelatin is one thing that is extracted from animals who may not have been slaughtered with the halal method. But he was arguing, for something which was even more, you could say, challenging, where when cheddar cheese is made, they used something I think that is extracted from stomachs of animals, and I think it's called rennet or rennet or something like that, and this chemical. Uh, I think that chemical then goes through some sort of processing, or in the process of making cheddar cheese, it goes through some sort of chemical changes. And he was arguing that because of those chemical changes, it is not the same thing as it was before. And as evidence, he was bringing the chemical transformation that happens between wine and vinegar. And he was saying that vinegar is halal, even though wine is haram, and yet it has been derived from the same thing. And he was basically saying that this gelatin and this rennet, all of these kind of catalyst, or things that are used to to change the state of something, they have been chemically processed and they are not the original thing. Hence, there is no halal haram issue there.
I appreciate that line of argument, and I think it's a very important uh, way of thinking. worthy of being taken seriously. As yet, I would distinguish between alcohol getting transformed into vinegar and, let's say, oak getting transformed into something which is different. Because uh, when we talk about alcohol, the basic problem is uh, its ability to intoxicate. So there is nothing otherwise, you know, impure about alcohol. Alcohol is not what you would otherwise despise. Uh, you can use it for fragrance, etc. You can use it for your as fuel if it's possible, etc. Um, the flesh of an animal is, I think, as yet, when back, obviously the question continues to be there in my mind. I would like to revisit my view. When you're talking about pork, you're talking about flesh of any other beast. Um, we know that it's haram. It's wrong. It's coming from its some part of its body, and then it is made to be transformed into something else. Even if it changes its composition, chemical composition, its form, it still has come from the same animal. I mean, the animal, its flesh was not expected to be eaten. Why? Because it's a beast. Um, doesn't really matter whether it changes its form or not, changes its composition, its chemical uh, composition or not. But I'll keep thinking about it. Obviously, if you are convinced by the arguments of an important scholar and he or she is making sense, you have every right to follow that line of argument because, after all, we're not here to follow individuals. Individuals are only there to give you arguments which
Yeah.
you may or may not be convinced by.
The reason I quoted him is because that he is a Salafi scholar, and Salafis have a tendency to be actually more strict than other people. But I'll just leave it there. And Muhammad Beg Saab was asking a question. I'm not sure if he's still interested in asking that question. Muhammad Beg Saab, I have unmuted you. Just one moment.
Assalamualaikum.
Right.
एक्चुअली मुझे ना कल किसी ने एक क्वेश्चन पूछा तो मैंने कहा वही उर्दू में रिपीट कर देता हूँ. एक दोस्त ने शादी कर ली लास्ट मंथ, तो उसने कोई 50% फ्रेंड्स को इनवाइट किया था मगर 50% लोगों को नहीं इनवाइट किया. मतलब उसके 20 दोस्त होंगे, 10 को इनवाइट किया, 10 को नहीं किया. उसके इस कंट्री में कोई और दोस्त है नहीं, बस यही 20 लोग हैं. मैं पूछना ये चाहता हूँ, उसने जो निकाह किया अलल ऐलान नहीं किया, जैसे गांधी साहब बोलते हैं कि अलल ऐलान निकाह ही होना चाहिए. तो पूछना ये था, क्या उसने ये ठीक किया या जो बाद में लोगों को बताएगा वो भी ठीक चलेगा? बस यही मेरा क्वेश्चन.
जी, देखिए मैं let me just mention briefly what the question was, because there might be somebody who wants to know it in English. If a friend who has had his marriage and the ceremony did not have all the friends that this gentleman had in a certain country where he had only a few friends, let's say 20 of them, but not everybody was invited. So let's say there were 20 friends, 10 of them were invited and 10 not invited. Now, is it going to be a valid nikah, considered a valid nikah, given the fact that one of the conditions of nikah is it should be properly announced? My answer is that it's a valid nikah. The reason is that in a nikah where you start having suspicion that was not properly announced, there is a deliberate intention on the part of the bride and the bridegroom, or both, to hide the decision from people, from elders, from parents. So if an announcement is made and not everybody is invited, sometimes it's difficult for you to invite everyone. Or maybe you are in a hurry or whatever. But the intention is not to hide. The intention is not to keep it away from to learn about it. Then it's perfectly fine. I think the guy is already done. But if he wants to give another walima to another party, well, he's most welcome. In fact, he's encouraged, strongly encouraged to do it.
All right. Uh, so if we do not have any more questions from anybody else, then I would like to ask a question because we are already running over time a bit. If you're not in a hurry, Dr. Saab, maybe I'll take 2-3 minutes more.
Please, most welcome.
So recently on our group, we were discussing why should prophethood have ended? I mean, was it necessary to have ended? Don't we need prophets today?
You see, the answer to this question depends on the answer to another question. That is, why do the prophets come? If the answer is that the prophets come to reform a society and to help people become pious and God-fearing, then the question is very relevant because people are actually more evil now, probably at least as much as they were before. Or some people might argue that even more. So if prophets used to come and they used to reform societies and cause people, evil people, to become good, then why are they not coming anymore? But the fact of the matter is that that's not why prophets used to come. It could be a result, call it an additional advantage, a bonus advantage of them coming to this world, that people used to become pious, especially those who were in their company and and believed in them. But the reason why the prophets would come, which is mentioned in the Quran, is to clarify God's message to the mankind, to make available God's decision, His verdict, His plan to people. That availability should be there potentially. It's not that they would go to each and every person and let him or her know um, physically, by physically, encountering them and talking to them. The message should be available for everybody who is keen to know what the truth is. So when prophets used to come earlier, they would deliver the message and their contemporaries would learn the message from them directly. When they would leave the world and before another one arrives or would arrive, this message would get distorted, altered, and a new messenger would come, a new prophet would come, and would revive, uh, put the message of God back to its pristine form. And then the same process would happen when this prophet would go, and people would start going astray and taking the message like that. After the last prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, when it has been ensured that the basic message is not going to change, it's there, fully preserved in the form of the Quran and in the form of Sunnah. Now, anyone who wants to know what God's message is, God's plan for the humankind is, well, we already have with us text that is intact and traditions that are equally intact Obviously, there are problems of interpretation. There are problems of differences. Basically, potentially the message is there, and therefore, any new prophet now, given the advancement of in communication and transportation, any new prophet who will come is going to only cause confusions, conflicts, ambiguities, because the message is already there. What is he going to do? It's there. I mean, interpretation is done to be done by us. Understanding is to be developed by us humans. We will disagree, okay. But by and large, message is a text. It cannot be distorted. Its text cannot be taken away.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you for giving us your time. And this, of course, is not the end here. If you have any more questions, we've got a WhatsApp group. You can post your questions over there. People have direct contact of Dr. Khalid. You can send him questions as well. We'll conclude our session here, Dr. Saab, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah.